There is a moment in every life that cannot be delayed, avoided, or escaped. No matter how busy you are, how strong you feel, how far away it seems, it is coming, quietly, certainly, without announcement. And when it arrives, everything changes in an instant. Now pause and imagine this carefully. A person is lying down, surrounded by people, maybe family, maybe loved ones. Voices are present, movement is happening, the world is still continuing around them. And then something shifts. The body is still there, but something is different, because life, the thing that made that body alive, aware, responsive, is no longer the same. The nafs, the soul, is about to leave. Now reflect on that moment deeply. For your entire life, your body and your soul have been together. Every thought, every action, every feeling, all experienced through that connection. You move, you speak, you see, you feel, because your soul is present. But now, that connection is ending, not gradually in a way you can control, but in a moment that comes when it is written. Now think about what that means. Everything you once had control over stops. Your voice becomes silent. Your movement ends. Your ability to respond disappears. The same hands that held things can no longer move. The same eyes that saw the world can no longer see. The same heart that felt emotions no longer reacts the same way. And yet, you are still there. Now pause here, because this is where understanding begins to shift. Death is not the end of you, it is the end of your connection to the body. Now reflect on the transition. The soul begins to leave, a moment that is described in Islamic teachings with seriousness, with weight, with reality, not something to be ignored, not something to be treated lightly, because this is the moment where your life in this world closes. Everything you built, everything you chased, everything you worried about, it all stops. Now think about how quickly that happens. A person who was speaking moments ago, now silent. A person who was moving, now still. A person who was part of the world, now separated from it. And the people around them, they can see the body, but they cannot see what has just taken place. Now imagine the scene from their perspective. They react, they feel lost. They feel sadness. They begin to process what just happened. But from the perspective of the one who has just left the body, something completely different has begun. Because for them, this is not an ending. It is a beginning. Now pause and reflect on that deeply, because everything you thought was real life has just ended. And everything that comes after is something you have not experienced before. Now think about how little control you have at that moment. You cannot go back. You cannot say, "Give me more time." You cannot fix what has already passed, because the time you had is finished. And this is what makes this moment so powerful, because it is the only moment in your life where your opportunity to act ends and your reality begins. Now reflect on your own life again. All the things you plan, all the things you delay, all the things you think you will do later. This moment does not wait for any of that. It comes when it is written, and when it comes, everything else becomes irrelevant. Now imagine the silence that follows. The body remains. The room is still there. People are present, but something essential is gone, and the journey has begun, not to another place in this world, but to something completely different. Because the moment the soul leaves the body, you are no longer part of this life. You are now moving towards something else. And the next step of that journey is closer than most people think. Once the soul has left the body, everything begins to move quickly. Not in a rushed, chaotic way, but in a way that feels structured, familiar, almost routine to those who are still alive. Because for them, this is something they have seen before, something they understand. But for the one who has just passed, this is completely new. Now pause and imagine this carefully. Your body is still there. The same body you lived in, moved with, used every single day. But now, it is no longer you. It is something being prepared. People gather, not for conversation, not for normal interaction, but for something serious, something final. The process begins. The body is washed, carefully, respectfully, gently. This is not just a physical act. It is a moment of honor, a moment where others take care of what you can no longer take care of yourself. Now reflect on that deeply. For your entire life, you were responsible for yourself, your actions, your choices, your care. But now, that responsibility has shifted completely. You are no longer in control. Others are handling everything. Now imagine being wrapped in a simple cloth. No luxury, no status, no distinction. The same simplicity for everyone. This is one of the most powerful contrasts in life. Everything you once owned is left behind. Everything you once cared about no longer matters in the same way. All that remains is you and your deeds. Now pause and let that sink in, because this is where reality becomes clear. The things you spent your time chasing are not coming with you. The only thing that follows you is what you did. Now the moment continues. The janazah prayer is performed. People stand, rows form. They make dua for you, asking Allah for mercy, for forgiveness, for ease. Now think about that. At this stage, you cannot speak, you cannot ask, you cannot make dua for yourself. Others are doing it for you. And this is one of the last connections you have with the living world. Their prayers, their words, their hope for your mercy. Now imagine the transition that follows. The body is carried, moved from one place to another. The people walk with it, some silently, some reflecting, some remembering. But slowly, the reality becomes clearer. This is not a temporary movement. This is a final journey. Now reflect on the Kaaba, the grave, a place that most people avoid thinking about, a place that feels distant, almost unreal when you are alive. But now, it is real. Now it is the next destination, and there is no delay. The body is lowered, carefully, gently, placed into the ground. Now pause and imagine that moment. The earth that you walked on your entire life now becomes the place that holds you. The same ground you lived above now becomes your space below. This is a transition that no one truly understands until it happens. Now think about what happens next. The soil begins to cover, slowly, layer by layer, until the body is no longer visible. Now reflect on that silence, because once the grave is closed, everything changes again. The people are still there, but not for long, because this part they cannot stay for. Now bring this back to your own life. How many times have you attended a janazah? How many times have you stood there, watched the burial, felt the moment, and then returned to your life? Because that is what people do. They come, they pray, they leave, and life continues for them. But for the one in the grave, something else is about to begin. Now pause here, because this is the moment where the real transition happens. Not when the soul leaves the body, not when the body is prepared, but when the people begin to walk away, because as long as they are there, there is still a connection. But when they leave, that connection ends. And what comes next is something you will face alone. First, there are people, voices, movement, presence. You are placed in the grave, and for a moment, it does not feel completely empty. There are still footsteps around you, still sounds above, still a connection to the world you just left. But then, it begins. People start to leave. Now pause and imagine that moment carefully. The same people who carried you begin to step back. The same people who prayed for you begin to turn away. The same people who stood around your grave begin to walk off. And with every step they take, the sound fades. Now reflect on that deeply, because this is not just physical distance. This is the moment where your connection to this world truly ends. You can no longer follow them. You can no longer call them back. You can no longer be part of what they return to. They go back to their lives, and you remain. Now think about the silence that follows. The footsteps disappear, the voices fade, and suddenly there is nothing. No movement, no conversation, just stillness. Now pause here, because this is the first moment of complete realization. Everything you knew is gone. The world you lived in is no longer accessible. The people you loved have returned to their lives, and you are now in a place that is entirely different, alone. Now reflect on that feeling, because this is something every person will experience, not metaphorically, not emotionally, but literally, a moment where you are placed somewhere and everyone else leaves. Now think about how often you rely on people, family, friends, connections, the presence of others that makes you feel secure, supported, not alone. But this moment removes all of that. Not because people do not care, but because they cannot stay. Now imagine the depth of that realization, that no one can follow you into this stage. No one can share it with you. No one can take your place, because what comes next is yours alone. Now reflect on your life again, all the relationships, all the interactions, all the people you spend time with, and then think about this moment where none of them can help you anymore. None of them can speak for you. None of them can change what is about to happen. This is the reality of the grave. Now pause and feel the stillness, because this is not just silence. This is a transition from a world full of noise to a space where everything becomes clear, because once the noise is gone, there is nothing left to distract you. Nothing left to delay you, nothing left to hold on to. Now it is just you and what you brought with you. Now reflect on that deeply, because at this moment, titles do not matter, status does not matter, wealth does not matter. The only thing that matters is your reality, what you did, what you believed, what you carried into this moment. Now think about how powerful that is, because for your entire life, you are surrounded by things that distract you from this reality. Responsibilities, goals, problems, plans. But here, none of that exists. Only the truth remains. Now pause again, because what makes this moment even more intense is this. You are aware, not in the same way as before, but in a way that makes the situation real. You understand that something has changed, that you are no longer in the world you knew, that what comes next is not something you can avoid. And this is where the next phase begins, because the silence is not permanent, it is not empty, it is preparing for something, because soon you will not be alone anymore, not because people return, but because something else arrives. And what arrives is not something you can escape. The silence does not last forever. It feels deep, heavy, complete, but it is not empty. It is a pause, a moment before something begins, and then something changes. You are no longer alone. Now pause and reflect on that carefully. This is not like the presence of people you knew before, not familiar, not comforting in the way you are used to. This is something different. A presence that carries seriousness, a moment that cannot be delayed, because what comes next is not optional, it is the beginning of questioning. Now imagine the weight of that realization. For your entire life, you were the one answering questions. People asked you things. You responded. You chose what to say, what to hide, what to ignore. But now, you cannot avoid answering. Now reflect on what this moment represents. This is not a casual interaction. This is not a conversation you can control. This is accountability, direct, clear, unavoidable. Now think about the questions that are asked. Who is your Lord? What is your religion? Who is your prophet? Now pause. These are simple questions, not complex, not detailed, not something that requires long explanations. But what makes them powerful is this. You cannot answer them based on what you memorized. You answer them based on what you lived. Now reflect on that deeply, because during your life you may have heard these answers many times. You may have repeated them. You may have known them. But at this moment, knowledge alone is not enough. It is your belief, your actions, your consistency. That determines how you respond. Now imagine the difference. A person who lived with clarity, who believed sincerely, who acted upon that belief, their answer flows, not forced, not delayed. It comes naturally, because it was real in their life. Now imagine the opposite, a person who knew the words but did not live them, who heard the truth but did not hold on to it. Now, at this moment, there is hesitation, confusion, because what was not firm in life cannot become firm now. Now pause and feel the seriousness of that, because this is the first test after death, not based on what people thought of you, not based on your appearance, but based on your reality. Now reflect on how direct this is. Everything is stripped away. No distractions, no delays, no second chances to prepare, just the truth of who you were. Now think about the environment of this moment. It is not loud, it is not chaotic, it is focused. Everything is centered on you and your answers. Now bring this back to your own life. How often do you delay thinking about these questions? How often do you assume that knowing the answers is enough? But this moment shows you something different. That preparation is not about memorization. It is about living in a way where these answers become part of you. Now reflect on this deeply, because this moment is not meant to create fear without purpose. It is meant to create awareness that what you do now shapes what you will say then. Now pause again, because once the questions are answered, something else begins. Not another test, but a result. Because based on those answers, the reality of the grave begins to change, not randomly, but according to what you brought with you. And that is where the next part becomes even more real. The questions have been answered, not with words alone, but with truth. Now everything changes, because this moment is not just about being asked, it is about what follows. Now pause and imagine the stillness again. You are in the grave. The questioning has taken place. And now something begins to shift. Not physically in a way you are used to, but in a way that defines your experience moving forward. Because the grave is not the same for everyone, this is where reality becomes deeply personal. Now reflect on that carefully. Two people may be buried in the same al-ard, the same soil, the same environment from the outside, but their experience inside completely different. And the difference is not random. It is based on what they brought with them. Now imagine the first outcome, a person who lived with belief, who held on to their faith, who tried, even with flaws, to stay connected to Allah. For this person, something opens, the grave expands. Now pause and feel that shift. What once seemed like a confined space becomes wasi, not tight, not suffocating, but open in a way that brings ease. Light enters, not darkness, not fear, but something that brings comfort, something that changes the entire feeling of the place. Now reflect on that deeply, because this is not just physical, it is a reflection of something greater. A person who lived with light now experiences light. A person who lived with clarity now experiences clarity. Now imagine the feeling of that. Relief. After everything that has happened, there is ease. A sense that what is coming next is not something to fear, but something to be hopeful for. Now reflect on the second outcome. A person who ignored me, who delayed, who lived without holding on to what mattered. Now the experience is different. The grave tightens. Now pause, because this is not something exaggerated. It is a reality described with seriousness. The same space that held the first person with ease now feels restricted, not open, not comfortable, but tight. Now reflect on the meaning of that, because it is not just about space. It is about the consequence. A life that was disconnected now leads to a moment that reflects that disconnection. Now think about how powerful this contrast is. Same grave, different experiences, same earth, different reality, and the only difference is what each person did before they arrived there. Now bring this back to your own life, because this is where the message becomes real. Every action you take, every choice you make, every moment you live is shaping this outcome, not in a way you can see immediately, but in a way that will become clear when it matters most. Now pause and reflect deeply, because this is not about perfection. No one is perfect, but it is about direction. What are you moving toward? What are you prioritizing? What are you holding on to? Because in the end, that is what defines your experience. Now think about how often people focus on this world. Comfort, success, recognition, all of it feels important, but at this moment, none of it matters. The only thing that matters is what stays with you. Now reflect on that one more time, because it changes how you see everything. That what you invest in now is what you will experience later. Now the grave is no longer just a place. It becomes a reflection, a mirror of your life. And that is what makes it so real, because it is not something distant. It is something you are building right now. And this leads to the final realization, because once you understand this, you cannot see your life the same way again. Now step back for a moment. Everything you've heard, the moment of death, the journey to the grave, the silence when people leave, the questions, the reality that follows, it may feel distant, like something that happens to others, like something that is far away in time. But pause and think carefully. You are not as far from this moment as you think. Now reflect on that honestly. Every single person you have ever known, every generation before you, every person who once lived, planned, hoped, and thought they had time, they all reached this moment, and none of them knew exactly when it would come. Now ask yourself a simple question. What makes you different? What guarantees that you have more time, that this moment is far away? The truth is, you don't know, and that is what makes this real. Now pause and feel that. Because this is not meant to create fear without purpose. It is meant to create awareness that your life is not unlimited, that your time is not guaranteed, that the moment you have just imagined is part of your reality too. Now reflect on how this should change your perspective, not in a way that makes you anxious, but in a way that makes you intentional. Because when you understand that something is certain, your actions begin to shift. You stop delaying what matters. You stop ignoring what is important. You begin to think differently about how you live. Now think about your daily life, the things you focus on, the things you spend your time on, the things you worry about. Now compare that to what you just heard. The grave does not ask about your status. It does not ask about your achievements. It does not ask about what people thought of you. It asks something else. Who is your Lord? What is your religion? Who is your prophet? Now pause, because everything comes back to this. Your relationship with Allah, your belief, your actions, that is what stays. Now reflect on how simple and how serious that is at the same time. Because you are not required to do something impossible. You are required to live with awareness, to live in a way where your actions align with what you believe. Do not ignore the reality that is coming. Now think about this deeply. If you knew for certain that this moment was coming soon, would you live the same way? Would you delay the same things? Would you ignore the same reminders? Most people would say no, but the reality is, it is coming. Just not on a schedule you can see. Now pause again, because this is where the final shift happens. This is not about being perfect. It is about being aware, about trying, about not living your life as if this moment does not exist. Because ignoring it does not delay it. It only delays your preparation for it. Now bring everything together. The grave is not something to fear blindly. It is something to understand, something that reminds you of what matters, something that brings your focus back to what will actually stay with you. Now reflect on one final thing. You are alive right now. You have time right now. You have the ability to act, to change, to improve, to turn back, to correct what needs to be corrected. And that is something you will not have later. So what will you do with it? Because this moment, the one you just heard about, is not a story. It is your future, and it is closer than you think.